I'm a box class, you know what I'm saying?
I reckon you shot 5 times.
Not true. I left it over.
The fact that he suffered a mother became a surprise. I think it was incidental recrimination and their fathers that became their two-day marriage. Anyway, enough of that.
I'm sort of getting over the idea, if you know what I mean.
There's a speed limit in this statement to Nev. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Suppose you get down off your motorcycle and give me a ticket.
Suppose I let you off with a warning this time.
Suppose it doesn't take.
Suppose I have to whack you over the knuckles.
Suppose I bust out crying and put my head in your shoulder.
Suppose you try putting it on my husband's shoulder.
That tears it.
I'm a box class, you know what I'm saying? That's how you fucking
I reckon you shot 5 times.
Not true.
Thank you for weathering the storm. Got Dorian right off the coast of Florida. Not really doing a whole lot, thank goodness. My area. Sepsi's Bandcamp in the description. Check it out. Separate beats. Let's see, on the board today.
recrimination and recrimination. Fathers that became that to their marriage. Anyway, enough of that.
But back online, things getting connected. Not really sure what happened, but we got it back together. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot that happened in the Bahamas. It seemed like, unfortunately, but for Duval, I have the door open, so sometimes you guys might hear a little bit of the Dorian sounding, or the sounds of Dorian in the background, the wind. And excuse me while I try to run all this stuff while hosting the show at the same time. All right, so welcome to the Boyd. This is Dorian episode. Thank you for joining. Got a couple people with us, one person on Facebook. So thank you for joining. And if you are just sort of tuning in impromptu, we just are here to discuss just stuff that's on your mind. So let's talk about whatever's bothering you, or things that you're thinking about. I'm glad that we did not throw a nuclear bomb into this hurricane. I think that would probably would have caused more problems than what ended up occurring anyway. So yes, Wally Do, thank you for checking it out. This is live right now. We are live right now, and thank you for chatting on the live chat. On Facebook, you also can chat on the live chat and join the conversation if you want to talk about some things. That last week, we were talking about all wars being bankers' wars. That was a pretty deep topic. I don't know how deep I want to go this time. Maybe we can go back to that, but I think it was getting sort of deep in there. But I think there is some truth in that. I think the big question becomes, what is it that American citizens are supposed to do about that? That becomes the big question. And what can you even say about that? You can only be so honest about things, or otherwise you will be the target of action from whoever is in charge, if you're questioning who's in charge. So let's see what's going on. So Wally Do, what's on your mind? Anything cool happening? I believe that's who we got watching. We know got one person on YouTube. So very unique folks. Only a couple people in the entire earth are tuned in right now to this show. And so we could talk about whatever you want to talk about. There's just been a lot of stuff going on. I've been trying to wean myself a little bit off of social media. But I always check every once in a while on just different, Facebook, or I got banned from Twitter for making fun of Bill O'Reilly. So I can only see shadows of Twitter as they tease me about what's going on, but then I try to check the updates that they send me, and I can't because I'm banned from Twitter. So whatever. But what else? Tons of stuff, I guess. I mean, there's just so many things happening that folks have some beef with. I don't know. So many things. Global warming. A lot of folks talking about that, whether that has anything to do with some of the storms we're seeing. I imagine it's hard to 100% predict. I just think that you can't just dump a whole bunch of stuff like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, oxides of nitrogen, et cetera, into the atmosphere and think that it's okay to just keep doing that and doing that. But there's people that can make some money while that happens. It's just like people make a ton of money off of tuna as they go extinct, and then the last tuna is going to be worth a ton of money. So when the last tuna is gone, the last guy gets to make his last buck, and that's just how it goes. There's no real invisible hand out there to protect the tuna for the sake of the market as a whole. People are in it for themselves. So, yeah, that's sort of what we got going on. So we got some more folks joining in, talking about just whatever. Sometimes, you know what? There's some folks out there talking about how some of this coverage of these storms is sort of contrived to create hysteria, to boost ratings, and then also to boost consumerism in local stores and things as people buy supplies, water, etc. What do you think? I don't know. I could see it. There's also anti-price gouging rules. I see a lot of memes floating around talking about price gouging, how price gouging should be allowed because it is a natural market force, and the only way to truly account for resources and scarcity. Tell me what you think. Do you believe that? Do you believe price gouging is okay? Do you think it's should be controlled by the government? That is some. Those are some questions that have been coming up, on the social media feed. What else? And then just questions about looking at stuff like the Bahamas, much devastation occurred, and whether or not, what's going to happen with that. I mean, is America going to help, or are not going to help, or I don't know. Even if Americans wanted to help, a lot of Americans are hurting right now, and they get gaslighted about whether or not they have given up of their earthly pleasures to help other folks or not. And I don't know. I think a lot of people would. It's a little bit tricky though, because inflation and the fact that wages aren't really moving too much. Tell me what you think. Put some comments in there. Looks like Wally Doo's got jumped on and off a little bit. Got a connection. I understand. I've got some kind of hokey pokey setup going on with my internet right now in the shop studios in Duval County, Florida. But we are trying to make things work. But we got the storm going on. I don't know if you guys can hear the rustling of the trees in the background. Open the door to share that sound with you. While they do is jacking the neighbors' interwebs. All right. Well, you know what? They probably got bandwidth to spare, so why not? Right. I'm sure if someone's cracked into my security, they're probably doing the same to me, and that's why my Netflix and shit don't work half the time. Maybe not. All right. So we got some folks that were joining on Facebook. Leave a comment. Let us know that you were here and say hi. Thank you, Wally Doo, for your participation in the show. So late show today, man. Trying to connect everything back together. Thought everything was working fine, and then bam, hit a snag. One of my monitors, which is very important for me to have. Oh, hey, no problem. You can. If my Netflix hiccups every once in a while for you to enjoy the internet, then it's a small price to pay while we do. But yes, thank you all of the folks that are joining us tonight. Leave a comment, and Facebook folks, I hope I'm able to see your comments. For some reason, Facebook does not update very well for me in my hokey pokey internet connection. Though I do see that there are a couple people joining. Throw a comment down and talk to us a little bit about what's going on. Yes, so the topic of the day is Dorian, I guess. I mean, it's been sort of like something that's put this whole week on pause up here in Jacksonville, Florida. But things I think will go back to normal tomorrow. Just sort of sitting out there. Radar says it's supposed to dump some crazy water down, but I didn't see anything. There's a little bit of wind going on. Well, I'm glad. It could be bad. It could be like the Bahamas or something, and I didn't get that, so that's good. But there was a lot of hoopla going on. People were going crazy about it, trying to get a bunch of supplies and stuff like that, water. But, you got to be prepared for these kinds of things. But I don't know. Sometimes I feel like some of this is contrived. What's up? Superfan Mike, what's happening, man? Thank you for jumping on. But I don't know. It's one of those things where we have a hard time knowing what's real anymore. We try to trust our news. We hope they're like us. They empathize with us, that they want to know that, that they would want to know the truth, just like we want to know the truth. It's so hard to tell. It's hard to tell who's real and who's not. But, hopefully nobody got hurt too much or didn't lose too much property or have any damage during this hurricane that has been slowly slogging through everyone's life over this last little while. But yeah, I'm glad I don't have much more to report about it. Every once in a while we get a gust of wind. Every once in a while we get a little bit of rain. But it's pretty much calmed down around here. So the question becomes, what should we talk about? So, Mike, Wally Do, what are some things that have crossed your mind during this time? I'm seeing some things on the news about Walmart curbing some of their ammunition sales, and that's causing a little bit of hoopla, especially in some of the right-wing corners of the world. I don't know. It's all an attempt to curb the gun violence and the mass shootings and things like that are going on, which I think we don't want to see a bigger picture problem that's happening. Why do people feel that this would be the answer to their problems in any way? And for some reason they see it that way. And I'm not really sure why. I think that's a question we need to ask ourselves as a society. But Pandora's box has been opened as far as guns, I believe. So Mike says, I got supplies last week and I didn't notice any price gouging. Yeah, and there's supposedly anti-price gouging laws out there. I saw some libertarian posts that were pro price gouging, and there was all these people that were going on and giving these dissertations about why price gouging should be good and allowed and is the only way to truly control a supply for a time like a hurricane. So, I mean, it brings up a bunch of different questions, because what if you're poor and you can't afford the necessities that are now being gouged to you? And then some people are like, well, then if they really needed it, they'll figure out a way to get the money. I don't know. That becomes a question that we have to ask ourselves as a society. We really have to think to ourselves if we want to have a world in which that's going on or not. And so some people believe that we should, some people don't. Libertarian stance, typically, for those libertarians out there, maybe you disagree, is that yes, we should have no government intervention and price gouging should be allowed and expected in the market. That is the hand of the market doing its work. So I don't know. I don't really. I believe that the market forces sometimes can hold people hostage, and I think that we have to try to find a way around that kind of relationship between each other. Though some people feel like, you know, this money system and what someone's willing to exchange for whatever it is that service or good or commodity, um, they feel like they can leave it on the shoulders of the market. Like, but that's the thing, the market has a price for everything. The market has a price for children. I mean, there's a child slave trade that's happening somewhere out there, and there's a price for it, because I mean, that's the market. You know what I mean? um, so we have to have more than just a market making a determination on how things should work in our society. So should someone have the freedom to sell their children because they have, their children are minors and they have quote unquote ownership or some type of rights over their children? Should they be able to sell their children? Those are some questions that we need to ask ourselves as a society, because there are some people that say, yeah, they should have that, be able to, under their volition, do what they choose. Should children be allowed to work full time before some certain age? There are folks that believe that, yeah, we should have 12-year-olds back at work, or we should have 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds back at work. So, because they want to help, if someone wants to help the family, etc., they can do that. And so, we decided for a while as a society that we didn't want to live like that. We didn't want kids working. We wanted to have a better economy, to the point where we didn't need kids to work in order to live in this country. But we're getting back to the point where some people are defending that notion. So it's sort of weird. So tell me what you think. Put some comments down. Got a couple folks on Facebook. Throw some comments. Let me know what you think. Mike has not seen any price gouging, which is awesome. You're technically not allowed to do that, but hopefully people weren't going to do that anyway. And let's see here. So we got some folks joining on Facebook, and we got a couple folks on YouTube. But yeah, so sort of funky episode tonight. Had those technical difficulties early on. Just a weird week. Had the hurricane come through. Turned out it was just sort of some little bit of wind, a little bit of rain. Thank goodness, at least for me. There are some folks along the waterways that are suffering, and sorry about that. Wally Doos asks, thank you, Wally Doo, for asking this. What's your opinion on 14-year-olds working if they want to? Yeah, that's a little tricky. If they want to, yeah, I mean, I think they should be able to if they really want to. But that becomes sort of a tricky situation, because there are, what other economic pressures are causing 14-year-old to want to work? But they should be able to go to school. But we also probably should talk about school, and there's some critiques about public schools, public education, that we should definitely discuss as a society, But yeah, 14-year-old wants to work, they want to get some new Jordans. I mean, that's up to them. but there are some. There's always ways to game the system, so that becomes a question. So how do you create some laws or some rules that make it so that you don't basically have a parent forcing their child to do work in order to support the family. And if we do have a situation where we need that to happen, then maybe there are some bigger structural issues going on in our economy that are forcing families to have to make that kind of decision, to have their 14-year-olds working. But that becomes a big question. They want the new Jordans. What kind of jobs can they have? Do they have to have a certain amount of pay? Do minimum wage laws apply to them? Those become, there's a bunch of questions there. And honestly, I prefer to keep the government out as much as possible. But like I said, we have to ask ourselves a question as a society whether or not we want a situation where, well, in this case, I don't know what this kid's doing with as far as his studies versus wanting the new Jordans. How much time is he dedicating to work? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's for him and his parents to discuss, as far as how they want to handle their situation. But sure, yeah, why not? They should be able to. I think that at some point a kid should be able to decide if they want to work. 14-year-old, I don't know. I mean, that is pretty young, but I don't know. We should talk it out as a group and figure out what's figure out what's a good way to go about it. I mean, to me, it's really up to that kid and his parents as far as what kind of work, how many hours, etc., that kind of thing. All right, so we had some good questions there. Wally Doo says, I couldn't wait to work at 14 to buy what my parents wouldn't splurge on. Yeah, so Wally Doo was driven at 14 to be able to go ahead and work and get the things that he wanted to get. So, between him and his parents, how he wanted to at 14 handle his work responsibilities versus school responsibilities versus home versus responsibilities, whatever. Hey, whatever works. I wouldn't say let's not allow kids to do that, but there is something to be said about kids that have to get up and go to work and supply income for the family and whatnot. And that's really where the question comes in. So some folks that want to start working when they're 14 to buy some Jordans, that's definitely one aspect of the potential out there for people to have kids working. But the other aspect is forcing the kids to work because that's the requirement to maintain the household and to the kids' detriment. So they're not able to go to school, they're not able to get the education they need, etc. All right, so some good questions. Thank you, Wally Doo. Thank you, Mike, for jumping in. Got a couple viewers on both Facebook and on YouTube. Looks like my Facebook folks are dwindling down. Thanks for joining. Throw a comment on the live comments and we can talk about stuff. Hopefully the Facebook here is updating so that I can see what you guys are saying. All right. All right, Wally Do. How do we create laws that draw the line? Yeah, that's a good question. So I think some of that we have to think about. Yeah, I mean that's a good question. We have to think about what the best ages are that we. I mean that's just really the big question. How do you create a law that people aren't just going to try to game and force kids to do things against their will to a large degree? Um, how do you create those? I think that's where we really should be talking about some of these issues. Um, whereas right now we speak in such binary, binary blocks like no kid should work. Like, well, what does that mean? No, and a 14-year-old can't go buy new Jordans with a part-time job. You're going to eliminate that? Like, I would want to eliminate that. So at what point, Wally Do has a question. Well, how do we create laws that draw that line? Where is the line? And at some point that you have to put a statutory number down and define some things because people are going to try to game it. So I guess we got to look at what's the most likely time that, or the biggest impact that it could have on a kid. So maybe it's sometime during high school that they can't be working full-time jobs or something like that. But I mean, we also got to look at high school and its value to the kids and versus going out into the workforce, even if it's an entry-level job of some sort that they can get as a high school kid. So yeah, it's hard to say. What's up, Chris? Let's see. All right. So, yeah, how do we create laws that draw the line? That's one thing that I think one question we have to look at is, or at least some things we have to consider is what's happened in the past. What have we had in the past? What laws do we have currently, and why do they exist now? So, all right, Chris. Yeah, what are we chatting about? It's sort of how Dorian was a bust, which is thank goodness for me. I'm glad I didn't have to do any major repairs or deal with any crazy stuff. But yeah, we were talking about. Oh, Dave's jumping in. What's up, Dave? All day. It ain't where you been, it's where you going. Yeah, so Hurricane Dorian, child labor laws. I think also sort of about libertarian stuff here and there. Which I mean, I agree a little bit with the libertarians on some things. I think the government should be representative of the people, and when it's not, then there's a problem. I don't think I'm not an anarchist like a lot of the libertarians are. But, some of the real Marxists out there are big anarchists because Marxist communism calls for a stateless, classless society, which is basically anarchy. But yeah, anyway, what do we got? So Hurricane Dorian, yeah, I think sometimes I just wonder how much of this is real reporting they're trying to do to actually inform us of what's happening, and how much is contrived so that we buy more shit from different people. It's hard to say sometimes. I just don't even know. What do you guys think? Jump on the chat line. What has been on your mind? Dave, what has been on your mind? Throw it on to the live chat. Someone on Facebook, whoever's watching on Facebook, jump in with a comment on the live chat, and let's see what's going on. Got 5 people on YouTube. What's up, YouTube people? Dave says Georgia. I don't know what is that. Mark is on. What's up? Media is driven by fear. Yeah, ratings a lot of times are driven by fear. Got Georgia on his mind. Man, what are you doing? What are you typing with over there? Autocorrect. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for jumping in on the live feed. Almost didn't have the show tonight, having so many technical difficulties. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to throw it on, see who jumps on, and see what happens. We had a couple people jumping in, and so I was like, you know what? I'm going to just push through and see what is up. So what kind of things are we thinking about today? The more controversial, the better, I think. Why not? We did talk a little bit about child labor laws. I think we currently are sort of spoiled in that we've been so removed from the struggle. Back in the day, there was a bigger struggle where you really did have kids foregoing education in order to go working in the mines and factories in some place, etc. And we don't have to deal with that kind of thing. All right, Mark says the general neutral hurricane was a bust. Dorian, yeah, is that a man's or a woman's? Both. This is how the things are going to be from now on, perhaps. It was a bust. Dave says, ain't going to try to pretend I can keep up with all this smarty party shit you're on. Talk about some hip hop or something dumber. There's not even any smarty party stuff we're talking about. It's nothing smarty party. I mean, my whole thing is we don't know half the time what's real or what's not. So we just got to talk about that shit. But yeah, I don't know. I've been sort of sleeping on hip hop a lot lately, so I don't really know about what's happening in the hip hop world, to be honest with you. Chris says, let's talk about reform in regards to ex-felons and what is the best way to help keep them from going back down that road when they're trying so hard to make small wins each day. Wally Doo says, if you know a chick named Dorian, her ball are huge. Dave says, hit that Lil Pump, bro. Haha. Lil Pump. I haven't even heard really any Lil Pump. I think I have maybe one song, but I don't remember. Ex-felons, help them going back down the road. You know, the big thing about ex-felons is that, you know, they, you know, you have no alternative to entering into some type of exploitative relationship with another person in order to survive in the current system. So in other words, you have to go find someone to work for. Otherwise, you can't survive. And having the ex-felon mark on your records or something like that is going to probably preclude you from getting a lot of jobs. And that becomes a problem. So what's your choice? You know, if you can't get a job, then what's your choice? But to go back into trying to make ends meet in the way that probably got you in trouble in the first place, right? So, you know, what's the answer to that? I don't know. Maybe it's governmental jobs programs. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there's some other types of guarantees, maybe governmental guarantees that can help assuage employers to hire reformed felons, etc. But I don't know. I think it's the big thing is to try to look at why are there felons in the first place. You know, if people were given decent jobs that paid well, that you know had some level of importance. You know, would people do that instead of whatever created, you know, caused them to become felons in the first place? I don't know. I don't know. All right, so let's see what else has been going on. Mike says felons that have been incarcerated have an 87% return rate. Right. And so what's the point of going to jail if 87% are going to return? Right. Obviously, there's something wrong with our justice system and the prison system. Chris says there's a guy I know that has been in prison before and changed his life. Another guy who also went to prison who can't get out of his own way, but is hungry to be a better person. Chris says one guy is a business owner, the other is a worker. How can you motivate someone to see that they too can become a success story? And then, yeah, Mike says it's all about the choices we make. Yeah, one guy's a business owner, the other is a worker. How can you motivate someone to see they too can become a success story? That is tricky. I mean, the world a lot of times presents a lot of negativity, and you really have to be able to sift through that. If you're trying to tell somebody or convince somebody to push through and become a success, you have to be able to really understand what their motivations are and what is it that motivates them on a day-to-day to either do the crappy things or do possibly motivate them to do good things. Mike says it's all about the choices we make, and it's indeed it is. But how do you have a mind frame in which you make the choices that will aid you in your life as opposed to harm you in your life? I think that becomes the big question, because yes, everyone's making choices, but there's some people that continually make bad choices. So how do you help people not make bad choices? I guess if you guys have some insight on that, that would be some good stepping stones to some philosophical discussion there. But yeah, I don't know. Prison is a tricky business. I mean, there's some people that have been to prison that's really messed with them. And some people, it seems like it's actually reformed them, and they don't seem like it's done much damage, or etc. So I don't know. Chris says, okay, next question. Is the dollar collapsing? And if so, are we going away from fiat currency and back to gold standard? That's a good question. Mike says, I find a lot of felons are close to illiterate. I think a lot lack of education is part of the cause. Yeah, that's another question too. If these folks that are illiterate were given the choice and the opportunity to attend classes and go to school, do you think they would? That's one question, I wonder. Chris says, Chris is asking about the dollar collapsing. That's another big question. I mean, if you look at a lot of the, when we were talking about all wars being bankers' wars, if you look at Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, look at Iran, look at even Venezuela, and North Korea, China, the Soviet Union to some degree. We're looking at places that don't have the central bank running them, or aren't using or are threatening not to use dollars or the petrodollar to purchase and exchange oil in. And so that seems to be a threat to the U.S. empire. So we see military action occurring. We almost talk about it as if it's a separate entity, and it pretty much is, from between the U.S. people and what I believe the majority of the U.S. people want versus what's happening in the government. I think are two completely different things. So we have current wars occurring because we need to uphold the petrodollar. Otherwise, There will be a massive collapse in our currency, and we will suffer a major recession. Um, and who's to say that the world wouldn't just be able to do that to us? They might. Would there be some military action that we could take against them? I don't know. I don't know. So that becomes a big question. So Chris says Iran is not allowed to use the dollar anymore due to their sanctions. They have found a way around it. Mike's been collecting gold and silver for the past few years in case it for the right need it for a rite of passage. You never know. Yeah, you never know. I mean, when shit hits the fan, it might hit pretty hard. I don't know what that's going to look like. It's coming though. We're bound to have another recession. Every 7 to 10 years, we have a recession. We had one back in 2008. We're bound to have one soon. It's coming. So, what are we gonna do? What's it gonna look like? I don't know. There's too many moving parts. I'm not an expert on all that. Maybe someone out there is going to be able to call the shots and get it right. But you have to find them out of all of the shit out there, and the people who don't know what the hell's going on as well. So, hard to say. But one thing I do believe in is the resiliency of the American people. I believe that there is ingenuity that's sort of innate in our culture in America, and that we can find a way to pull together in the face of a depression or other crazy apocalyptic type scenario. But maybe not, because there are some not prevailing, but there are some forces out there that literally push selfishness as a virtue, that believe in devout individualism, which I'm all about individual rights and freedom and liberty. But there is a point where someone's individual liberty can sometimes spill over with externalities that people don't think about, like pollution and different things like that. But yeah, lots of stuff. See, so yeah, something's gonna happen. I mean, the rich people have been building bunkers and doing different things to sort of hedge their bets against the impending collapse out there. They've been sort of doing that for some time now. Oh, when's it going to happen? Who's to say? I don't know if it's going to happen. It can. It really depends on a lot of stuff. There could be a socialist revolution. There could be a fascist revolution. There could be no revolution. There could be just a bunch of collapsed, households, and the economy collapsed with bread lines kind of thing. Or there could be some type of revolt and fighting. It's hard to say. It really depends on how the American people get manipulated on the days that are leading up to these bold actions. But I think that we should think about these things and take them seriously, because there are definitely some ramifications to all of us if shit were to hit the fan to that degree. And what are the signs? How do we know? How do we know that day is today? Usually, if you are reacting to the sort of effect that's already occurring, then you're already too late, is the problem. Chris says, I believe it's been happening for years. Probably, but it hasn't collapsed. It hasn't really hit the fan to a massive degree. I think a lot of people are still sort of living their normal life, quote unquote normal life, slogging through their day to day, doing their thing. And, depending, some people are definitely living a better life than others out there right now. But there are some folks out there that just are existing right now, and really seeing a better future is hard for them. And as it happens to more and more people, we have to wonder what's going to happen to society as a whole. What does the collapse of our society really look like? If it were to crumble apart slowly, would we recognize it as it's happening? Those are some questions I think we should all be asking ourselves as we look around ourselves and see the world lighting on fire. Mark says, universal income, yay or nay? I think UBI, universal basic income, or universal income. I think that is a neat idea. I don't think it's the right solution because it doesn't address capital and labor relations. I think people should be treated as partners, especially as you work there in an organization for many years. I feel like people should earn equity in that over time. And so I think that moving to a different labor and capital relation with people as partners instead of commodities is a better answer than UBI, because UBI is not going to address that, and it'll simply sort of smooth over some things, some contradictions in capitalism that don't really that just really aren't being addressed with UBI. But yeah, I can see why people like universal basic income. I don't think so. I don't think that would be the right way to go. Dave says, dog, it ain't that hard. Most cats that have are the ones that earned it. Yeah, so it depends on what you mean by earned it. Like a billion, there's really not people that are billionaires that didn't earn their money off of the backs of someone else. Someone else was doing something for them, and they were able to take a cut off of that. And in some cases, they might be able to make a relatively good amount of money doing that, whoever enters into these agreements. But at the end of the day, that is an exploitative arrangement, because you are making a profit off of someone else's labor. So over time, really, you are using someone else's abilities and labor to create this wealth. And that's where the question or the issue comes in. Dave says, look at the Wild Kingdom. The lazy lion ain't getting bedtime with the herd. Yeah, that's true. The lion, yeah, but things have also changed around. And I'm not saying I'm not saying you get to be lazy. You definitely got to work. So that's definitely part of what's going on. I'm just saying that that the people that work in an organization aren't necessarily always the ones that are getting the money in the organization. Sometimes it's the people who are in control of other people who are making the money, and that control doesn't really necessarily mean work. It's just sometimes their literal job is to find a way to make more money off of the people that are on the bottom rungs of the organization, right? So that's what I'm saying. Dave says there's always levels. That's true. I agree. There's levels. There's levels to that. Not everyone, I think, deserves to be able to earn equity into a business. If they can't stick around and be part of an organization over a period of time, then there's some things that they should really look at within themselves as to why that seems to be the case. All right, Dave says, if you don't like being on the bottom, get the fuck out of Dodge. Yeah, that's true. A lot of times you can, in some circumstances, you can do that. Some folks, maybe they're not smart enough, maybe they're not, maybe they got too many kids, maybe got this or that, whatever reasons, they may not be able to work their way up. Now, that's, and some people, maybe they like their position at the bottom. The question becomes, do the people at the bottom still deserve to live? And to what extent do they deserve to live? Because really at the end of the day, if you were to die, your employer is just going to find another one of you. So if they pay you less than it costs for you to survive, that's fine to them. They can just find another person desperate enough to take that money. So that's where things get sort of weird. And that's where we have a complex sort of relationship that happens. And, then it gets complex. And that's where people have a hard time, I think, looking at it holistically. Because there are some lazy assholes out there. And we got to talk about that for sure. And I definitely don't want to give those people a pass because they are being lazy assholes. All right. Dave says most people are happy to be unhappy. There are a lot of people that like to wallow in their unhappiness. They become identified by it. It becomes part of their identity, and they almost feel strange when they're not wallowing in misery because it's just not them anymore. You might know people like that. That is a hard type of person to be around for very long. All right, Dave says easier to complain than actually take action. That's true. It definitely is easier to complain about something than it is to take action. But sometimes action can result in sacrifices, especially if there's a power dynamic. So let's say you wanted to start a union at your job or something like that. Well, trying to take action might result in, losing your job, losing, your source of income. So it depends on what you mean by action, depends on a lot of things. Culturally, right now, we're not in a position where people are going to get support. There's a lot of scabs out there that would backstab people trying to work collectively to bargain for better pay or better treatment or better working conditions. And there's always somebody that's out there willing to get the money that might be more desperate or something like that. And that's where the problem comes. There's always somebody more desperate in this scenario, and the question becomes, even do the desperate deserve to live too? Or if you are desperate, what does your life amount to? And is there a way out? You know what I mean? So you got to have at least that. Right. And you do have to work and you have to try to push yourself through. You're right about that. But at the same time, there also needs to be a systemic means by which you can actually do that. If we were to grant people over time equity in the businesses that they helped work and build bigger and bigger, etc., then people could have a source of income for them to start a new business. They could have a source of capital for them to also start a business or pursue their hobby or pursue something. So these are also methods by which people could be, through their hard work and dedication, could be rewarded by basically getting some time back to do these things. So there are multiple facets to the situation that I'm trying to attack by making that type of proposal. But yeah, good questions, a lot of good commentary. Got 5 folks, which is totally a huge crowd for the Boyd. Thank you all for jumping in. But yeah, I mean, a lot of good discussions. Bring on some topics, bring up some different things you guys want to talk about, and spread this around to people who like to debate and they want to talk about some kind of something. I don't know. Let's debate about something. I think it would be fun to do something like that. So spread it around and get folks to check out the Boyd. Do have a Patreon, Boyd. Remember Seprock Beats, got the Bandcamp in the description. Sometimes Dave, which is Dave Mill, sometimes all day. I featured his as well. But you can go. It's Seprock Beats. Thank you for joining me on a Hurricane Dorian Storm episode of Boyd. And I'll catch you next
I'm a box rap, you know what I'm saying? That's how you fucking
I reckon you shot 5 times in the bedroom.
Not true. Never left the door shut.
I'm sort of getting over the idea, if you know what I mean.
The speed limit in this statement, Jeanette. 45 miles an hour.